What is the point of an education? What is the point of a degree if the place that shaped you never benefits from it? In 1987, Sonam Wangchuk graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. Like many engineering graduates, he could have pursued opportunities in India's largest cities, a comfortable career, a stable future, a successful life. Instead, he chose to go back to Ladakh, back to a place where many children were failing, not because they lacked intelligence, but because the education system wasn't designed for their language, their culture, or the mountains they called home. Back to villages struggling with water shortages, back to problems that most people had simply learned to accept. He didn't return because someone asked him to. He returned because he believed education should do more than change one person's life. It should change the lives of the people who need it most. He helped build a school for students the system had already written off. He developed the ice stupa, turning winter into water for entire communities, and for more than 4 decades, he dedicated his life to education, innovation, and the future of Ladakh. This is the story of Sonam Wangchuk. Chapter 1. September 1st, 1966. Sonam Wangchuk was born in Uletokpo, a small village near Alchi in Leh, Ladakh. His early years were shaped by his mother, who taught him basic literacy at home in their native language, as there was no local school. No school in his village, in his valley, within traveling distance. None. His mother, Tsering Wangmo, taught him to read and write in Ladakhi. She taught him the things a child needed to know in that particular landscape, in that particular culture. Not the things a government curriculum had decided children should know, the things that actually mattered where they were. His father, Sonam Wangchuk, was a prominent politician, a Congress minister in the Jammu and Kashmir government. By Ladakhi standards, this was a family of some influence, but influence in a village with no school could not conjure education out of thin air. Sonam Wangchuk did not attend a formal school until around the age of 9. 9 years old, his first classroom, his first experience of an education system designed not for Ladakh, not for high-altitude desert children who spoke Ladakhi and lived by the rhythms of the Himalayas, but for the plains of India. A system imported wholesale and applied to a place it did not fit. Chapter 2. Sonam Wangchuk chose engineering, mechanical engineering, the science of how physical things work, how forces interact, how you build solutions with materials and mathematics. His father had other ideas. Wangchuk funded his own B.Tech education after a rift with his father over his career choice. The politician father and the engineer son. Different visions for what the future should look like. Different ideas about what success meant, and Sonam Wangchuk, rather than capitulate, did something extraordinary. He paid for it himself. At 19 years old, the summer before his first year of engineering college, he raised enough money in 2 months by teaching to fund 3 years of engineering college. 2 months teaching children to pay for 3 years of study. This teaching experience taught him another valuable lesson, he later said, that you haven't really learned something until you can teach it to someone else. He completed his B.Tech in mechanical engineering in 1987. Every other graduate at his level would have taken their degree and moved toward the careers it unlocked. Engineering firms, government positions, private companies in the cities. Sonam Wangchuk went home. Back to Ladakh, back to the mountains, back to the question that had been planted in him at age 9 in a classroom where everything being taught was wrong for the place. Chapter 3. In 1988, 1 year after completing his engineering degree, Sonam Wangchuk co-founded the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, SECMOL. He founded it with a group of students who had, in his own words, been victims of an alien education system imposed on Ladakh, a system that taught Ladakhi children about rivers and plains and monsoons, in a language many of them barely spoke, while the glaciers above their villages were retreating, and the water supply was failing, and the skills that actually mattered in high-altitude desert survival were being taught by nobody. The numbers were catastrophic. Pass rates in government schools across Ladakh were near zero in many areas. Children were failing examinations designed for a completely different population, in a language not their own, being tested on a curriculum that had no relationship to their lives. In 1994, Wangchuk launched Operation New Hope, a collaborative effort between SECMOL, local communities, and the Ladakhi government to reform schools from the inside. Teacher training, culturally relevant curricula, Ladakhi language instruction, parent involvement, the community as part of the solution rather than a passive recipient of whatever system arrived from Delhi. It worked. Not perfectly, not immediately, not without resistance, but it worked. SECMOL's approach focused on culturally relevant curricula, teacher training, and initiatives that treated the community as an active participant in education. In 1998, the SECMOL Alternative School was established, a campus unlike any other in India. The SECMOL campus uses no fossil fuels for cooking, lighting, or heating. Everything, every light, every heated room, every meal cooked, runs on solar energy. The buildings themselves are engineering innovations, constructed from Earth and designed to stay warm even when the temperature outside falls to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Passive solar architecture, no heaters, no fuel bills, just physics and design. The campus won the International Terra Award for Earth Architecture in 2016. An award-winning, entirely solar-powered school campus in one of the most remote and extreme environments on Earth, built by an engineer who had paid for his own education by teaching other people's children. Chapter 4. Here is something almost nobody mentions about Sonam Wangchuk. For 12 years, from 1993 to 2005, he was the editor of Ladakh's only newspaper. Between 1993 and 2005, he served as editor of Ladakh's Melong, Ladakh's only print magazine. Ladakh's Melong, the only print publication covering Ladakh. Written in Ladakhi and accessible to people, the national press had no interest in covering. For 12 years, while simultaneously running SECMOL and launching Operation New Hope, he was also the sole editor of the only magazine that gave Ladakhi people a public voice in their own language. His work influenced Ladakh's Vision 2025 development strategy, helping shape not just schools and education, but the entire long-term planning for how the region would develop. Engineer, educator, editor, policy advisor, all simultaneously in his 30s, in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Chapter 5. The Himalayas hold the largest store of ice outside the polar regions, but Ladakh's relationship with that ice, and with water, is not simple. Natural glaciers melt in summer. Crops need water in spring. The gap between when the water is available and when it is needed has always been the central challenge of life in Ladakh. And as climate change has accelerated glacier retreat, as the high-altitude ice has receded faster than at any point in recorded history, that gap has become a crisis. Sonam Wangchuk was watching water one winter, watching streams still running at minus 20 degrees Celsius temperatures, water flowing through the landscape even in deep winter, water that was being wasted, flowing past the places that needed it, flowing away in the cold. He had an idea. What if you used that winter water, water that was flowing anyway, water that was going nowhere useful, and redirected it through a pipe? What if the pipe carried the water to a shaded location at lower elevation, where it would spray upward into the freezing air? As the water spray rose and fell, it would freeze, layer by layer, night after night, through the whole winter. By spring, you would have a glacier. Stored water in frozen form, in a conical shape that minimized surface area and maximized volume, melting slowly, precisely, releasing its water gradually through the spring planting season. The cone shape, like a Buddhist stupa, the domed religious structures found across Ladakh, gave the invention its name, ice stupa. The first ice stupa was built in 2013 in Phayang village. It stored enough water to irrigate farmland that had previously been dying for lack of spring water. The ice stupa technique stores winter water for use during the spring season, helping communities cope with water scarcity. The idea spread beyond Ladakh, Pakistan, other Himalayan communities. Anywhere that has winter water and spring drought, anywhere that the gap between glacier melt and crop need is creating a crisis, the ice stupa principle applies. An artificial glacier, built from gravity and pipes and freezing air, by a mechanical engineer who had taught himself to pay attention to how water actually moves through a mountain landscape. Chapter 6. In 2009, the Bollywood film 3 Idiots was released. The character of Sonam Wangchuk, a brilliant engineer who rejects the conventional education system, drops out and goes to the Himalayas to build innovative solutions for rural communities, was openly based on Sonam Wangchuk. The film made him famous. Overnight, millions of people in India and across the world who had never heard of SECMOL or Operation New Hope or ice stupas knew the name Sonam Wangchuk. What the film got right, the core principle, that the education system imposes a single model on enormously diverse populations, that intelligence takes many forms, that the most valuable innovations often come from people who refuse to accept that the problem cannot be solved. What the film missed, the actual work, the 12 years of editing a newspaper, the Operation New Hope collaboration with government, the engineering discipline behind the ice stupa, the decades of unglamorous, difficult, relentless effort that the fictional genius compresses into a 2-hour arc. The real Sonam Wangchuk did not have a soundtrack. He had bureaucracy, and funding shortfalls, and teachers who needed retraining, and farmers who needed convincing, and politicians who needed persuading, and pipes that needed laying in -20°C weather. That story, the actual story, is considerably less cinematic than the film, and considerably more extraordinary. Chapter 7. The SECMOL. Alternative school campus that Wangchuk designed is worth a chapter of its own. Because it is not just a school, it is a proof of concept, a demonstration built into the landscape of how human beings can live in extreme environments without destroying them. Even in Ladakh's winters, where temperatures fall below -30°C, the buildings remain warm through solar heating techniques. No fossil fuels, no gas, no coal, no fuel bills of any kind. The same sun that makes Ladakh one of the highest radiation environments on Earth, the same intense high-altitude sunlight that makes the region extremely valuable for solar energy. Heats every room, cooks every meal, lights every building. Students who come to SECMOL, many of them children who failed in the conventional government school system, learn not just academic subjects but practical skills: construction, agriculture, solar technology, water management, the things that Ladakh actually needs people to know. The campus won the International Terra Award for Earth Architecture, an award given to the world's most significant examples of sustainable earth construction, in 2016. A school in Ladakh, built from earth, heated by sunlight, won an International Architecture Award. That is what happens when you design for the place you are in rather than the place you wish you were. Chapter 8. In 2018, Sonam Wangchuk received the Ramon Magsaysay Award, widely considered the highest civilian honor in Asia. Often referred to as Asia's Nobel Prize, the award recognized his contributions to education reform and environmental innovation. By 2018, he had accumulated approximately 15 major awards. He had been recognized by Rolex for enterprise, by UNESCO for architecture, by Ashoka for social entrepreneurship, by international environmental organizations for climate innovation. Every award went back into the work. Every recognition was converted back into resource for the things still undone. He did not become a lecturer on the international circuit. He did not take the comfortable path that recognition of this scale opens up. He went home. Every time. Chapter 9, August 2019. Everything changed. The Indian government revoked Article 370, stripping Jammu and Kashmir of its special status. Ladakh was carved out as a separate union territory. No state legislature of its own, no elected assembly, administered directly from Delhi. For many Ladakhis, and for Sonam Wangchuk, what followed was deeply alarming. A union territory without constitutional protections was, in effect, a region whose land, resources, and environment could be controlled by decisions made in Delhi, without the consent or representation of the people who lived there. Wangchuk became a vocal advocate for Ladakh's political rights, calling for statehood and inclusion under the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which provides special protections for tribal areas. 4 demands, simple, clear, the constitutional protections that other tribal and minority regions of India already had, that Ladakh had been promised but not given. The man who had rebuilt Ladakhi education and invented artificial glaciers now found himself in a different arena. Not the engineering problem of water scarcity, the political problem of power scarcity. Chapter 10. What happened in the final 2 years of this story tells you everything about what it costs to refuse to stop asking. March 2024. Wangchuk began a climate fast in sub-zero temperatures on March 6, 2024. A day after talks between Ladakh's joint representatives and the central government collapsed completely. 21 days without food, in conditions where the body burns fuel simply to survive the cold. He lasted every one of those days. When he finally ended the strike, he thanked supporters across the country and said their backing had boosted his morale. The government did not give him what he had asked for. He said he would continue. September 2024. He began walking. 1,000 kilometers on foot through some of the most extreme terrain on Earth to bring Ladakh's demands to the capital. The march gathered supporters village by village as it moved south. At the Delhi border, stopped. 150 Ladakhis detained. Before the arrest, Wangchuk looked at the reporters and said, "I am not afraid of being arrested." He was arrested. September 2025. The peaceful movement he had spent years building fractured at the edges. Violence erupted in Leh, buildings torched, a curfew imposed, fatalities. Wangchuk had been 35 days into a hunger strike when the streets burned. He ended the fast early, not in victory but in grief. 2 days after the violence, arrested under the National Security Act, detention without trial. The same day, his school's foreign funding license was canceled. His wife Gitanjali went to the Supreme Court. The government told the court he had been detained for instigating people in a border area. The man who built glaciers to give water to farmers, a national security threat. June 28, 2026. He began again. A new hunger strike at Jantar Mantar. joining India's Gen Z-led Cockroach Janta Party, protesting the NEET UGH 2026 medical entrance examination paper leak that had compromised the futures of millions of students. The Cockroach Janta Party had started as an online satirical movement after India's Chief Justice was reported to have referred to the country's unemployed youth as cockroaches and parasites during a court hearing. The name taken as a badge of defiance. The protest, one of the biggest challenges to Prime Minister Modi's 12-year rule. His demands, the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, constitutional safeguards for Ladakh, and stronger protections for the examination system. Day 1, Day 5, Day 10, Day 17. On Day 17, growing visibly weaker, Wangchuk told fellow protesters, "I am weak from the outside but very strong inside. I will stay alive till July 20th at any cost. If you don't come and July 20th is not successful, I will come back as a ghost." July 18th, 2026, Day 21. Delhi police moved him to hospital without telling him or Gitanjali. His potassium had dropped to life-threatening levels. His wife stood outside the hospital and told reporters, "Sonam was brought here without informing him or informing me. They are not giving us the medical report." She paused. Then, "Even if Sonam can't join the march, I will lead that march, and it will happen as planned. They cannot stop it." The campaign spread across India. "Do not let the real-life Phuntsuk Wangdu die." July 23rd to 24th, 2026, Day 26. Then something shifted. Late on the night of July 23rd, 2026, Sonam Wangchuk ended his 26-day hunger strike. He said he ended the fast after a long negotiation on various conditions and in view of possible violence in the country. The government offered written assurances, no legal action against protesting students, compensation for the families of those who lost their lives, and a full parliamentary debate on exam accountability. Prime Minister Modi personally addressed the nation promising a tougher anti-paper leak law. The education minister had not resigned. Not yet. Wangchuk said, "Pradhan should have resigned. Had he done so earlier, the damage could have been addressed much sooner." And then added, "We have achieved what matters most. The students are safe from prosecution. The families of the dead will receive compensation. I am happy about it." He broke his fast. After 26 days, July 25th, 2026. One day after Wangchuk ended his hunger strike, Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan submitted his resignation to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Pradhan announced his resignation on Saturday, bowing to mounting pressure after tens of thousands of students and supporters had taken to the streets demanding his removal and sweeping reforms to India's examination system. In his letter, he said he was resigning to ensure that anti-national forces do not exploit the situation and to protect national unity. He said he took full responsibility. Hours after Pradhan's resignation, the Cockroach Janta Party announced it would end all nationwide protests with immediate effect, saying the government had accepted all their demands. CJP spokesman Ashutosh Ranka said, "All our demands have been accepted. We request all protesters to withdraw immediately and return home peacefully." A young protester at Jantar Mantar held up her copy of the Indian Constitution and said, "Young generation is here. This is a win for the Constitution. We are not a lazy generation." Here is what it took. A man who started with no school and a mother who taught him to read, who paid for college by teaching other children, who came home and spent 4 decades fixing things nobody else was fixing, who went on hunger strike in sub-zero temperatures, who walked 1,000 kilometers, who was arrested twice, who lay in a hospital bed with dangerously low potassium while his wife prepared to march to Parliament in his place, who ended his fast one day before the minister fell. It was described by international media as one of the biggest challenges to Prime Minister Modi's 12-year rule, and one of the most significant student-led political victories in modern Indian history. Chapter 11. Chapter 10. While the marches and the arrests and the hunger strikes have been unfolding, Sonam Wangchuk was also building something else. The Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh, HIAL. Co-founded with his wife, Gitanjali J. Angmo, a social entrepreneur and educator, HIAL is designed as an alternative to the conventional university model, a place where the Himalayas themselves are the laboratory and the curriculum. Here is what 35 years of Sonam Wangchuk's work looks like on the ground. Thousands of students who failed in the conventional system who found another path. A solar campus warm at -30 degrees Celsius. Artificial glaciers giving water to communities running dry. 12 years of giving Ladakh its own voice in print. A development strategy that shaped a region's future. A global movement of people who took the ice stupa home to their own mountains. And now, a man in a hospital bed, his potassium levels dropping, his wife preparing to lead a march to Parliament in his place. He was born in a village with no school. His mother taught him to read. He self-funded his engineering degree at 19 by teaching other people's children for 2 months. He came home and spent 4 decades fixing things that had never been fixed because nobody else was going to. He built glaciers in the desert. He rebuilt a school system. He walked 1,000 kilometers. He went to jail. He is in a hospital today because an education system, the same system he spent his life trying to fix, leaked its own examination papers and compromised the futures of millions of young people. And somebody had to say so, loudly enough that the government could not look away. An ice stupa does not appear fully formed. It builds slowly, night after night, layer by layer, water freezing in the cold air until something that seemed impossible, a glacier in a desert, is simply there. That is how everything Sonam Wangchuk has ever built works. Slowly, in the cold, layer by layer. The march is tomorrow. The fast is still running. The story is not finished.